Are you recording to the cloud or?
I am recording to the cloud.
Yep.
Yep. Well, yep. I know. I've done some other Zoom meetings.
So what I'm going to do as everybody's jumping on, I'm just going to ask everybody to mute themselves, just so we don't get too much background noise that comes into the discussion.
I just texted Rich.
So did I, about 10 minutes ago.
I assume there might be the start of a line to get on.
Looks like Rich is joining now.
Yep.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Apologies, I'm having an internet problem here, so I had to come on with my phone.
Okay.
I see Wacka on screen too, Michael. Are they going to record?
I am recording. I'm sure They are probably recording as well.
Well, what kind of actual start time do we want to have? Are people still
No.
joining, or?
It looks like our waiting room is empty now. It looks like Rich is here. So I'd say in the interest of time and making sure we had enough time for discussion, we could go ahead and get started. Rich, is that okay with you?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think I am kicking off then, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, then I will just officially welcome everyone to the first of two community meetings on the proposed 10 to 50 Main Street project. Please note that the meeting is being recorded. My name is Tricia Kendall. I'm a member of the planning board. I was also a member of a working group composed of planning board and select board members, as well as the owner and architect of the proposed project. And we worked to define a better process for public input into the project. So this is the first, I believe, meeting of its kind. With that just short intro to what we're doing tonight, I first want to introduce Rich Gordon, who is the owner of 10 to 50 Main Street, who's going to tell us where the project stands now.
Great, thanks, Tricia. As Tricia mentioned, my name's Rich Gordon, and I've been the owner of 10 through 50 Main Street for the past 10 plus years. I'd like to welcome all of you to our first of two public forum meetings. I'd like to take this opportunity to give you a brief overview of the proposed project. This process started several years ago when I was approached by the town to see if I'd be interested in being part of the planned Ashland redevelopment. I was very interested in this as I'm not only the owner of the property, but I also live nearby and have a great interest in seeing downtown Ashland develop and grow into a more prosperous, vibrant area with more affordable housing and a greater business presence. Over the past 2 years, my team and I have been collaborating with several members of the town administration and some members of various local boards to come up with a plan that can achieve economic growth goals set forth by the proposed downtown development. In that time, we've had many variations of the plans, and we are now comfortable presenting to the public. The highlights of this development are as follows. There will be 200 units of apartment housing, of which 25% will be affordable. There will also be over 30,000 square feet of mixed-use space, which could be a variety of different businesses ranging from restaurants, gyms, retail, medical space, potentially a bakery, and so on. We'll have a full-time shuttle bus available to all tenants to provide quick and easy transportation to the local commuter rail station. We're including in the site development a park area, a walking path that will connect from the town hall down to the waterfall. The project will be a LEED and green build, which will also include solar on the roof with the potential to give back some power to public facilities, in addition to powering common areas of the development. There will also be a community room that will be available for not only the tenants, but for public use as well. We're planning on renovating and keeping 10 and 30 Main Street structurally and aesthetically the same, but with new amenities and all new build out to meet the current building codes. My team and I are very sensitive to the historical concerns with this property and are doing our best to keep all of the structural and historical integrity that has been part of this property for over 100 years. We're also going to do our best to work with all existing tenants to help with their relocation needs that will arise. In addition, we will offer existing tenants the option to rent some of future space at desirable rates. This is just a general overview of the project and our plans. Our architect, Scott Richardson, will follow up to give a more descriptive narrative on the building and site plans. Our economic analysis consultant, Craig Seymour, is also on the line here this evening if anyone has fiscal questions or concerns. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you all this evening, and I will now turn this back over to our moderator, Rami.
Actually, I think I'm going to jump in just a minute, Rich. So thank you for that. I just wanted to note that the discussion today is going to be guided and facilitated by Rami Al-Samahi. Rami is a founding principal at the firm Over Under in Boston, whose work includes community engagement and public spaces in places like Ashburnham, Taunton, Chicopee, Cambridge, and Boston, but the firm does a lot of international work as well. The architect, as Rich mentioned, the architect Scott Richardson is going to be giving a presentation on the project, and town manager Michael Herbert is going to be helping with the flow of speakers and questions. So on that note, I will turn it over to Rami. I think the floor is all yours.
Thank you all. As Trish said, my name is Rami El-Samahi. I'm an architect, a planner, an adjunct professor at MIT, and for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm an independent third party here who will help you hopefully facilitate an interesting set of discussions. I have a fair amount of experience with community engagement across the Commonwealth. Trisha mentioned many of the cities and towns that we've worked with. And I guess I see my role sort of as threefold really today, to allow the architect and the developer to express their ideas as they are sort of envisioned today, to allow citizens who've come to this meeting to voice their thoughts and to sort of identify areas of commonality and concern moving forward. I would just ask, and I'm sure good citizens of Ashland need no reminder, but this is an open forum, and it's I think it's important that we will have very strong opinions, but that we voice those opinions in a constructive and respectful manner. With that, I'll invite Scott Richardson, the architect, to present the project, after which we'll have plenty of time to have questions and comments from anyone who so chooses.
Thanks, Rami and Trish and Michael. I will be presenting a PowerPoint. I think I have about maybe 30 slides. Some of you that have been involved in this project have seen this before. And let me see if I can get to the beginning. Do people see that? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And Michael, do I have to admit people then as the host?
Yes, you do. If you want to not make me host, but make me co-host, I can probably handle that task right now.
Okay, so. Yeah, I don't see co-host. I just say make host for you.
Then you'll have to handle both tasks.
Okay. Shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, so basically, again, for those of you who have seen this, apologies, but it looks like we have quite a few new participants. So basically, everybody's very familiar with the site and the buildings that are there and the historical use of the property. Basically, our goal is to provide a responsive and vibrant mixed-use development at this currently really underutilized prime location in downtown Ashland. And again, responding to the town's current zoning guidelines and overlay district and responding to the historical context. So we, come on. That's right. So, okay. The Angier Mills were constructed in 1869 to 1872. It's a 7-acre site that was originally developed for a textile mill. Those of you may know more about the history of it, and basically textiles were actually not ever produced here because there was concern about pollution to the Sudbury River. There's anecdotal stories about pollution otherwise, but basically it was a Lombard building for a while, manufacturing and other uses in it, multiple buildings along Main Street. They were predominantly 2-story granite buildings with mansard roofs. Some buildings were, the original context or planned development of the whole site was never realized, but then over the years there were buildings that were removed, and then also the 2-story brick structures at 50 Main Street were built in the 50s or 60s. Right now, there's about 140,000 square feet of space, primarily on the lower level, which has infilled in between the original buildings. Those of you who are familiar with the retail offices, dentist offices, warehousing, there's a couple of churches there, and the back of the house, construction-related services. So again, we know that this is a prime location for development. And okay, for some reason, this is not advancing. So I'm not sure why. There we go. Some, again, historic photographs, an image and or renderings on the left, and a couple of current photographs of the existing buildings as everybody is familiar with them. So our design approach has been to analyze the site from a historic viewpoint as well as a forward-thinking planning exercise. We've maintained the rhythm of the original buildings along Main Street and enhanced this with street-facing commercial and apartments on the upper floors. The two northern and most iconic buildings, as you are aware, 10-20 and 30, will be renovated in place and maintain the current historic characteristics. Project, as Rich mentioned, will provide approximately 30,000 square feet of commercial space and 200 apartments. An aerial view showing the complex. And again, these two buildings at the north end of Main Street will be renovated in place. There are quite a few small additions to them that will be removed, and there's some connectors between the two buildings. And whoever that is, mute. I don't know who that is, Michael. Do you?
Rich, yeah, it was Rich, I believe.
Okay.
He's muted himself.
Okay. And then basically from the south of 30 Main Street, as you can see, there are all these kind of 1-story connectors between these buildings that provide space to the lower level. This is 40 Main Street, which is an interesting building. I guess some of the history there is that it had a fire and all of the interior structure was removed, whether it was burnt or removed, and then a new roof was put on. And this building actually is a 1-level building that starts in the basement and extends up about 30 feet for a wide open space. And then to the back of that are just 1-story connectors and additions that were done over the years. We all know that from the 40 down to 50, we have, again, this 2-story brick structure that has a variety of uses in it. So again, as Trish mentioned, we had a couple of meetings with a working group. And through that, we basically came to some updates on the project, which we're presenting here. 10, 20, and 30 Main Street will both be renovated in place, and the historic massing of the buildings will be reinforced. The lower level of 10, 20 is actually now planned to be more commercial space, given the proximity to some parking areas there. We are proposing to reuse granite that's removed from the site or removed from the buildings. We're basically looking at utilizing it in facade work on the new buildings. There's a couple of tower elements we want to incorporate on the north and south of the buildings. And also we're able to use some of these granite blocks for paving and or benches. The south building, which is number 50, will incorporate a granite tower announcing the project as you come from the south. The former pump house, which is really not visible anymore at the north, will actually become an iconic granite structure closer to the Myrtle Street ramp entrance. Again, people are familiar with the site. It's, again, a prominent large parcel, 7 acres at the north end of Main Street, basically about 3/4 of a mile from the commuter rail station here. And as Rich mentioned, there'll be a shuttle bus to and from the site to bring people to the commuter rail so they don't have to drive. Again, everybody's familiar with the enhancements and beautification and walking trails that have been done for the mill pond and the bridge work and so on. And we want to connect to that. We have a walkway proposed around our site. Again, the other attributes of downtown are well known to everybody. So an analysis of the project, we basically, again, kind of a quick massing study. This is 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Again, as I mentioned, we're proposing to demolish everything south of 30 and then basically start to replicate the massing of the part of the buildings so that, again, they have the frontage on Main Street, but then extend back from Main Street. And basically developing an entrance into the site that's aligned with Pleasant Street. So that will be a controlled access into the areas on that level, as well as access to the lower level parking. Again, looking at some of the buildings in the downtown area relative to kind of the federal style and Greek revival styles, and some of the newer projects that have been built recently. We're basically taking some of the cues from the massing of those buildings, as well as responding to the form-based zoning that you've developed for the downtown. Again, the site is 7 acres. The zoning district allows an FAR 2.0, which equates to a fairly large development if you were going to go to the maximum of 600,000 square feet. We're proposing a development of about 290,000 square feet, which is less than half of the potential. And again, providing 200 housing units and about 30,000 square feet of commercial space. So as we analyze the site, we basically are looking at trying to relate to the Main Street corridor and the activity that's happening along Main Street, specifically on the south side of the project. We have obviously the corner spot, which is a popular attribute and a gathering space for the downtown. We want to basically have 50 Main Street become kind of responding to that activity. And we see that as an ideal location for a restaurant, as well as outdoor dining, and provide some good connectivity there. Again, this is our entrance to our on-deck parking, which will then have a ramp down to the lower level. And again, trying to liven up the facades, we would be infilling between buildings for more commercial space, and then as well as provide access across and connect our walkway to the river walk that's there currently. So as we take a closer look at that, what we're looking at is having our walkway come along, and then there is anybody that's driven behind the building, you're familiar with the concrete wall that extends along the Sudbury River. We're looking at developing a walkway along there. Again, right now, all these buildings have these connectors between them that basically the buildings have a hard time kind of breathing or identifying themselves. So we're kind of removing those to the rear so that they will be more, have more open space between them, and more daylight would be able to come into each of the buildings. We're basically developing kind of this iconic tower over here at the Myrtle Street area. What else? And again, trying to connect to the Ashland Historical Society's building, and also start to work with them on creating some historic markers on site. And again, the brick chimney would stay intact and be enhanced with some graphics and some lighting. So along the walk, again, the back of the side, we have this walkway along the Sudbury River, which can provide, again, a nice walkway area. And then as we come to the south side, we have access to what we'd like to develop as a small park on this south side. And then that would, again, connect up to Main Street. Excuse me. So along Main Street, as I mentioned, we want to do what we can to attract tenants that are going to have some life on Main Street, and again create this really good connection between the corner spot and our building at this end, and have an identifying icon on this building here. Again, a little larger view of that gateway entry, providing that granite tower that I mentioned here, and again provide that connection to the lower walkway and a park down in this area. So again, some imaging that we're working on currently. We have, again, right now, due to sight lines, we can't develop this iconic element where the pump house is because we need visibility as you're turning this corner. We also are going to level off this ramp that goes down into the parking lot so it's a safer entrance. So again, we want to develop, reuse some granite, develop an announcement on this side, and again, have that connection to the Mill Park and the River Walk. As you can see, we've removed, there's a small 2-story addition on this side of the building, which is really in disrepair. And we had the opportunity to walk members of the Historic Commission through the site the other day. And I think everybody concurred that that would be nice to get rid of. So again, we can basically maintain and enhance the fascia system and the iconic lines of the building as you approach it from this side. Again, looking south along Main Street, again, the first 2 buildings are going to be renovated in place and provided with, again, street side retail, commercial, or whatever use, again, it comes in there. And then we start with our new construction further down on the site. A view coming in from Pleasant Street. Again, we're not showing the traffic signalization, which obviously would be here. We will add that at some point. But again, this is a controlled intersection as it is now. And again, we have access into our driveway here, which provides parking for any retail that's on this level. And then we go down a ramp to the parking, which is essentially under all of these buildings. Another view from Pleasant Street. And again, this is 50 Main Street with, again, a tower reutilizing granite from the site. And again, our ramp down to our parking, as well as development for hopefully an outdoor eating area, or again, a sitting area along Main Street. And we do have basically a deck element that connects all around this building. So you have kind of an enhanced walk area, as you can see at the elevated area, which again connects back to the driveway area as you come in. As you can see, we have parking under all the buildings. And again, this off to the left would be our connector to the River Walk, which again, we're kind of standing on a corner of the River Walk facing the buildings. Another view from the River Walk towards the back of the buildings. This is our view up the ramp, the car access ramp with the kind of the terraced balconies on each side. And then a view of the River Walk towards Myrtle Street with, again, 10, 20, and 30 Main Street being renovated in place. And again, there are these small, pretty horrible looking 1-story additions to 1020 that would be removed. Some plans follow, probably not that exciting to look at. But again, basically the configuration of, again, retail, office, commercial space along Main Street. The intent is over on 50, we have a community room, which is obviously available for tenants, but also available for the community to utilize, club and co-work room potentially, and then a fitness center in the back. And again, as I mentioned, you can walk all the way around building 50 on a terraced walk area. Second floor with all apartments. And then again, the third floor is just in the new buildings. Both 10, 20, and 30 are only two-story buildings. So again, a little summary, we are looking at 200 units, about 194,000 square feet devoted to the residential component, almost 30,000 square feet of commercial space. We have about 380 parking spaces, both some are covered, some are open. So again, our total gross is about 290,000 square feet. So open it up now for questions and comments.
Scott, before you do you want to make me host and I can help?
I can do that.
Okay. While Scott's doing that, what I would ask everybody to do is if you do have a question, use the raise hand feature. So if you go down to the bottom and you see the menu there, you'll see one that says reactions. If you click on that one, you should see a raised hand. And I would just ask that everybody use that feature, and then we can have an orderly facilitation of the questions.
You are now host.
So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand now.
I see a Lawrence Dion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay to speak?
Please.
Okay. I've been following this. I'm a former planning board member for many years. Well familiar with the property. What I like is the way you are attempting to integrate nature. It's a property that's surrounded, as you well document, between the corner spot and the mill pond and the river behind it. And also a short distance away is Stone Park. For me, it's a part of Main Street that has some character. I would say from around Town Hall on down, there's some buildings, they're not architectural gems, but they have some nice character, which I like. I would hope that the character of this complex, that what you're proposing, fits in with what is already there. I noticed that the granite buildings have a mansard roof. I see no reflection of a mansard roof in your proposed new buildings. I'm wondering if that could be brought in. Another item is that the building that's on the Marconi property really is offensive because it's a wall that fronts Route 126 right up to the bare minimum setback. In this particular case, I find that the 3-story front, it's actually 3.5 stories. One of your rendering shows, the first rendering shows it actually being a 4-story building, which is not correct. It's going to be a 3-story building. There was a sketch that I saw a few months ago with a stepped back proposal with the buildings. I like that because you only had 2 stories in the front, and then the 3rd story was somewhat recessed. I find that that would mitigate the sense of walls facing Main Street. I'm a little concerned that they're going to be straight up flat and with very little mitigating architectural elements, just basically walls with holes for windows. That concerns me. I would like to see a little bit more architectural variation. I like the idea that you're going to reintroduce granite blocks into other parts of the architecture. I see all of it being on the surface outside you might consider what was done with the Boston Stock Exchange and other buildings, where they brought some of the granite walls into the lower building, lower entry, and some of the more public space. It's a thought. It's a thought. I applaud the idea of keeping with the material that you're using. That part of Main Street has some character. I hope that this project will add to the character. Do I have anything else? Yes, the renderings of the front of the building that you showed, I don't believe you, the renderings in the front look like they're fairly expansive. You have an island in the middle of Main Street with trees on it. That's not going to happen. You don't have the space. The space that's there for parking currently, that's the space you have. If you're proposing parking in the front, how much sidewalk space do you have? It looks a little bit generous in your renderings. I realize you have a space limitation. I'm hoping that the fronts really are well designed. That's the part of this complex that the people, the public are going to see and what they're going to be living with. And being a person who lives on the other side of Mill Pond, I pass that complex every day. I do like the treatment, at least in the slides, of what you're doing with the existing buildings. I would certainly encourage that further. I understand the limitations in some of them because of the destruction, particularly that smaller building that was burnt. I guess for the moment, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Shall we move to the next question or comment? Tracy Hyams? You're still muted, Tracy.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Good, thanks. As I looked at the apartment layout, it looked to me to be mostly 1 bedrooms, studios, and a handful of 2 bedrooms. And I'm wondering whether that encourages sort of a family kind of aura to the new complex. I like the idea of renovation in general. We're a pretty family-oriented town. I'm an empty nester, so that part doesn't affect me. But I don't know. Are we bringing in that many sort of, single or couples to our area, especially in the downtown, or is there thought to more family-friendly sort of living spaces or amenities?
We can look at that. Thank you.
I thought I saw another hand up. I don't see it now.
There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Well, we can, let's go to those.
Oh, I see Joel. Joel has his hand up.
Okay, so let's take Joel's question and then we can jump back to some of the chat questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for holding this forum. I think this is great. I'd like to see the town do this as often as possible on many projects. This is just great. I want to thank Lawrence for his comments. I thought they were very insightful, and I really appreciated some of the architectural comments, especially with the idea of trying to avoid that kind of large wall, creating a kind of a canyon going down Main Street. I do like the idea of trying to have either, a 1 or a 2-story facade and have maybe any higher floors set back further. I have a number of questions. One is, what would be is there some kind of a projected number of new residents that if at full occupancy, talking only about the residential part of this, how would this impact the population of Ashland? That's a first question. I have a number of questions. Okay.
Is that a question for Craig?
Yes, I'm wondering if there's some estimate of how would this affect the overall population of Ashland at full capacity of the residential part?
I do not know, but we can find out. And based on, again, the units, we can certainly do some projections based on other information that's readily available.
Okay, and another, one of the large concerns I've always had about that whole area there in downtown is traffic. I come down Pine Hill Road. I just came down today and sat for about, I didn't really time it, but it was about 5 or 6 minutes on the corner of Pine Hill Road and Myrtle Street as cars kept whipping around the bend coming through downtown. And I literally couldn't turn. How many cars are expected in this development? And will all of them have access, if they choose to go that way, onto Myrtle Street rather than going out at the exit you showed opposite the end of Pleasant Street? I mean, could we be looking at another 150 or 200 cars going in and out of this complex with multiple trips a day coming onto Myrtle Street where their sight lines are very bad?
We have a traffic study. I don't have that right in front of me, but we can certainly provide that information.
Okay, because I mean, it seems to me that the exit that you showed on your drawings is very close to the curve where Main Street curves opposite the waterfall, and it just seems to me that the sight lines there are just, I mean, almost as bad as they could be imagined. I guess those are my only questions. The only comment that I have is we keep voting for mixed use development in Ashland. And I have perhaps romanticized where my grandparents grew up in Brooklyn, New York, where they lived over the bakery. That was mixed use. The commercial was on the first floor, and a small family lived upstairs, where it was an owner occupied housing and business combination. Now, when we talk about mixed use, it seems like the proportions are never specified in our bylaws, which is a great concern to me. And if I did the math correctly here, it seemed like the commercial to residential mix that we're looking at here is something like 1 to 6 square feet of residential to 1 square foot of commercial. I would really like to see that turned on its head and see us ambitiously pursue more commercial growth to provide more commercial opportunities for the residents, jobs for the residents. The idea that the pitch that we get is that if we build more residences, that would encourage more commercial growth. But I have yet to see anybody document anything even close to that, especially in Ashland. We talked about the rail transit district, and this was the great dream. We're going to build all this housing. It sounds good. We're going to put all this housing right near the train station, and then we won't have all the traffic and the cars. People will be attracted to that and use the commuter rail to go to work. But I don't know if there are new studies, but the original data that we were given, it's basically under 5% of the residents are using the train from that particular district. The point being not that you're in a rail transit district here, but that it's unclear that we can predict the activities of new residents and how they will impact the local area. It just doesn't seem like there's any real connection. It seems like if we want commercial, we need to be building commercial and not rely on some kind of myth that more residents will help stimulate more commercial growth. It seems like we're giving away our commercial space for residential, and there's not going to be room to build more commercial. So that's just a concern I have. I would really like, if it's, I think it always comes down to profits and economic feasibility and economic incentives, but I'm concerned that we're putting in too small amount of commercial here on this parcel, in a place that could be commercial. And we're trading that off for a more lucrative, perhaps, residential growth, trying to stimulate commercial, but then there's less space available for commercial. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate your holding this forum.
Thanks, Joel. I think, so Joel, you had a couple of questions first, right? So, and I think Scott tried to answer the occupancy piece, but going to traffic, Rich and Scott, have you performed any type of traffic analysis yet?
Yes, we have. George Connors has that. He's not with us tonight, but there's been a full traffic study that's been performed, and I believe that we could probably have that available for the next public forum.
Shall we go to some of the questions in the chat?
Sure, I can relay some of those. So the first question that we have from Frank is, why isn't the entrance lined up with Pleasant Street?
Yeah, I mean, ideally it would be fantastic if it could be exactly opposite Pleasant Street, but given the configuration of the spacing of the buildings and the dimensions that we need, it unfortunately is offset a little bit. Again, since this is a traffic controlled intersection, obviously that's the advantage, that we can have it offset a little bit and it'll still work. But basically, again, based on the dimensions that we need for the buildings and the spacing of them, we end up being a little bit offset from directly across from Pleasant Street.
All right, thank you. And then MEB asked if there are any ADA units in the living space.
Yes, so basically the Mass Architectural Access Board regulations require that any complex, I think it's over 20 units, and has to comply with type 1 and type 2, either adaptable or accessible units right from the beginning. So it's a certain percentage of the units would be accessible, and then most all of them have to be adaptable. So yes, we will be accommodating accessible units as per the Architectural Access Code.
Okay. Next question we have from Matt. Is there room for restaurants to have outdoor dining space? Because that should also be encouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. We are planning on accommodating that use, and we're hopeful that that will be one of the uses.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. Can the team update the community on the status of any environmental issues and any required response and cleanup?
So we have an environmental consultant on board. That's George Campbell. We could have him be a part of the next meeting. We are certainly addressing that, and we'll be compliant.
Okay. And before we go further on the questions in the chat, I know Joan has waited patiently with her hand up. So Joan, would you like to ask your question too?
Sure, thank you. I do have a few questions. First of all, Mr. DeJong, I actually agree with just about everything that Mr. DeJong said. I would like to see the mansard roofs continued, and the setback, more of a setback recess from the road. I do have a question about the buildings. So it looks like 4 buildings are actually being made into 5, is what I'm seeing. Because basically right now, I think I could be wrong, 10 and 20 are one building, or 20 and 30 are one building. I can't remember which. I would like to see the space between 20 and 30. I think was the area that we talked when we did a nice walk around, which I appreciate too. But that area that we talked about that would make a nice courtyard and keep that building, keep the facade of the building to the right. with the granite. And I think that would make a beautiful outdoor dining area. I did wonder how the height is measured. I believe it's 38 feet, and I'm wondering if it's measured from where it's measured from. When the buildings on the street look like they're, to me, like they're close to 4 stories. So that's my first question.
So if let me answer that. The existing height of 30 Main Street, which is the tallest of the 3 historic buildings, is approximately 30 feet to the top of the roof.
From where?
From grade.
Street level or bottom level?
Street level, much higher in the back. So we're proposing, again, the way the bylaw has been rewritten is that it is 38-foot maximum height. So that is to the proposed peak of all roofs on all the new structures. So we're basically having a roof line that's just 8 feet higher than the existing roof at 30 Main Street. And that is to the top of the visible roofs and the top of the visible dormers that you see from any side. And again, that's from the Main Street side. As you know, the site drops off to the back 1 level. So you basically gain a level to the back of the site.
Right. So I guess I'm wondering why the measurement isn't from the back of the site. Would that not meet the, what is the criteria is what I'm trying to understand of the actual.
So in some towns, and again, I don't think your bylaw is specific on that. In some towns, you take the average all around the whole site. But basically, the way I looked at the zoning is that it is from the Main Street side, as you're viewing the building from Main Street, that is the 38-foot height. And basically, the lower level is essentially what we're saying, for the most part, is basement garage space on the new buildings.
I guess from my perspective, I think I appreciate the look from the falls. I think you're keeping a really nice look there, and a nice coming around the corner. I think as you come around the corner, that the buildings on the end are extremely, to me, very imposing and very close to the street. And I think many people in town, I should say, not most, but many people that at least that I've spoken to, have a real problem with the building next door that is so close to the street and high, and it's imposing, and it just takes away from the downtown to my perspective. Mm-hmm. I was wondering how many children you feel will be added into the building, will add to the town?
Well, let me just respond to your first comment, is that these new buildings line up exactly with the existing building lines that are there, except for the commercial buildings that are being built between the buildings, and those are set back further from Main Street. So we're not building anything closer to Main Street than currently exists. As far as the population, that's not my areas of expertise. So Rich, do we have any information on that?
Scott or Rich, I can answer that quickly. The population estimate that we came up with for the 200 units is about 311 people. And a question that was just asked relative to the number of students, school-age children. And it ranges between 16 students using the town's fiscal impact model. And I've used an estimate of as many as 20 coming from the complex.
Okay. All right, thank you. Scott, to get back to your comment about the location of the buildings close to the road, I believe you, and I'm not questioning that. But I think the difference now is that instead of a 1-story building being that close to the street, you've now got almost a 4-story building being that close to the street, and that makes a big difference in the visual. I also had a question about the affordable. It says 25% affordable, which is great. Is that for Ashland residents? primarily?
I would assume, Michael, you would have more information on how the affordable housing component works, perhaps?
Yeah, so typically in an application that would have 25% affordable, whether it's a 40B comprehensive permit or something like this, which is through what's called a LIP process, a local initiative process, the town has the ability to indicate preference up to, I believe it's 50% for Ashland residents. So 50% of the units could be dedicated towards Ashland residents. I believe it's 50%. It might be higher. I'll need to check.
Okay, thank you. My last question, apologize, but the parking spots, I'm just a little bit concerned that I feel in not just this complex, but some of the other complexes too, that we underestimate how much parking is needed, just because I think most families, at least couples, each have a car. I mean, I know there's a bus going to the rail station, et cetera, but to the other gentleman's comment, really what percentage uses the rail as opposed to going to work in a car. And I think not having two spaces per apartment is going to be very limiting. Those are my comments, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joan, can I ask you a question?
You sure can.
You referenced the new building downtown, and we've got a couple. There's one that's across the street, 21 Main Street, that has the bagel table. And then there's the one next to the Federated Church, 128 Main Street. And I think they're two very different structures. Right. Which one were you referring to?
I was referring to the one on the same side as this complex. Yeah, the bagel table, I think, really kind of incorporates different, for whatever reason, I don't look at that building and say, what is it doing here? I look at the other building and say, what is it doing here? Because that would be how I would explain it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so Rami, I'm going to pull you in here because we have a question from Frank, or a comment, but I think it would elicit a question. So Frank's basically, hate the fact that the new buildings look like the ugly apartment buildings Framingham has put up recently. I guess we're trying to figure out what the pieces that are considered ugly or not in character. I mean, I can make an amateur assessment of it, but I don't know if you're familiar with the new architecture, Rami, but I don't know the right question to ask here. So,
well, I mean, it seems like, I mean, in the discussion so far, I think the comments have been sort of in two buckets, if you will. One is sort of practical questions: how many people it's going to impact? How traffic, is it going to impact and how is it going to impact the environment, the economy, et cetera? And the other one is from the very first set of comments, sort of how will it add to the character rather than detract from the character, which is essentially an aesthetic anxiety, right? That's being expressed in different ways from different people. And that's that's a harder one to pin down because everyone has the beautiful thing about architecture. Everyone has their own opinions. I would say in general, it's important for a town that is concerned about its history and character to sort of ask anybody who's going to build something in that town to demonstrate how it's keeping in context. And I think some of the early slides that Scott showed did do that. Scott makes an argument that the architectural features that they're proposing are coming from other parts of town. Now, what if I understand Lawrence's comments correctly, Lawrence is asking for a different set of contexts that think more about the industrial buildings with the mansard roofs and whatnot that are adjacent to the 1 year. So I think the question for you as a community are sort of to establish where you feel along that comfort zone. I mean, there are other issues to consider as well. I would say, you know, a building that is flat often feels bigger. A building that sort of breaks down the massing feels like a series of smaller buildings oftentimes. The way it meets the street is crucial. I mean, I think the arcade, the colonnade is actually something that will enhance Main Street in many ways. I'm trying not to put my own opinions in this, because my opinions actually don't matter for this conversation. But I do think that those are pieces that, you know, what happens on the ground floor is the most important part of the building from the point of view of everyone who's not living there, right? Anyone who's walking by, driving by, coming into a store. What happens along the ground floor is where most of your attention should go. And then secondary to that is sort of what the sort of facades that face the public realm look like. Now, we can have a debate about what's been presented versus what people are looking at or afraid of. And I would suspect that a lot of it has to do with how it meets the ground, and then the degree to which the massing is sort of broken down, right? How flat that continuous facade is. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Michael.
No, I think it's good observations. Scott, I want to ask you really quickly, is that presentation something that you can email to me really quickly?
I should be able to email it to you, yes.
Okay, because we can't share hosting duties or co-hosting duties, I could actually pull it up on the screen. Because I think Rami brought up a good point. You know, where are you drawing for the new buildings? Where are you drawing your inspiration from? I think you covered it a little bit in some of your slides, but especially that roof line. Where are you pulling that from?
I wonder, with regard to the parking, if I could ask a question of Rich and his team. Are the parking spots that you're providing above the minimum requirements, or are they the minimum requirements?
No, and again, I think there's some good comments about the number of parking spaces, and we have kind of been going through a variety of redesigns on this project. So I agree that we probably need to find a way to provide some additional parking over what we think we last counted. But to answer your question, we're basically below the requirements. So we would be looking for some relief there. On the flip side, as I mentioned, I think at this point we need to look at how we can potentially garner some more parking spaces on site. Again, this is a very large file, Michael. I'm not sure if I can actually send it
okay.
to you. Because I'm not sure. And again, I'm not connected to my main computer.
While you're working on that, there was a question for Craig, actually. And Craig, can you review the fiscal impacts of the project?
I can. Is there a way that I can share my screen? I've got a couple of slides here I can put up that summarizes the fiscal and economic impacts.
Unfortunately, no.
Michael, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you should be able to allow for others to share it. Is that not possible?
Yes.
I don't think I have that option, Rami. I'm familiar with it, and every other event I've been able to use that, but for some reason.
All right, well, I can just walk through it verbally to the best extent we can, and we can also include these in a follow-up as well. Based upon the current configuration, as I mentioned, we're looking at a population of about 311 is what the calculation comes out to be. Right now, the property is assessed at just a little bit over $1.7 million and pays $27,000 a year in taxes. When fully rebuilt and occupied, it's going to be valued somewhere north of $60 million and pay nearly $1 million a year in property taxes. As a result of that, and putting against that the estimated municipal service costs and the cost of educating the somewhere between 16 and 18 kids that might come out of it that go in the school system, it'll have an annual positive net fiscal impact of, I calculated, $436,000 a year. Now that accounts for $329,000 in additional municipal service costs and $186,000 in extra education costs for the 20 school-age children residing in those units. In addition, there's going to be one-time fees for building permits and water and sewer hookups that are going to be somewhere around $1.7 million coming to the town. And then from the automobiles that we anticipate being there, there's going to be about $30,000 a year in annual automobile excise tax. Now, this is on my own calculations, I also went back and updated the 2018 fiscal impact template that the town has utilized. And it came out very, very close with a net fiscal impact of about $429,000 and $900,000 in property taxes, less $330,000 in service costs. And it only predicts 16 school-age children at a cost of about $148,000. So again, similar, roughly $400,000 to $500,000 a year. There's also going to be economic impacts, both locally and to the state. The construction jobs are going to pay $775,000 in state income taxes, and sales taxes, almost $1 million on the materials purchases from during the construction. And once it's up and occupied and the commercial space is occupied, that's about 118 full-time equivalent on-site jobs in the retail, the office, and the other activities that go on there. They pay income taxes. They also pay annual sales taxes that will be generated from any of the retail activity, taxable retail activity that's here. And some of that money from those employees obviously will be spent locally within the downtown. Portion of the commercial space, we've talked about this in our group meetings we've had, is perhaps setting it up as kind of an incubator or maker space, providing opportunities for smaller businesses in town to get started and get going. There's the opportunity, as Rich mentioned, to retain some of the existing businesses and jobs on site and to make sure that they continue to contribute to the downtown. Indirectly, there's a spinoff of the 300, just from the construction jobs and everything else, there's going to be 200, 300 jobs created elsewhere in the region. Again, paying income taxes, paying state sales taxes, and spending money. From the people who are going to be living there, the consumer spending demand for the new households, total consumer spending demand is about $7.5 million a year. Not all of that's going to be spent in Ashland, of course, but some of it will. And so what you have is a base of individuals who will be going out for coffee, going out for dinner, going out and buying things down the street because it's going to be convenient. And it, in my opinion, adds to the town character where people do want to shop locally. And so I think that's the other economic benefit that has to be thought about here. So that's my summary.
Thanks, Craig. I do have that file now, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see this? I think in particular, this roof line, I'm sorry, this one is the one that I had a particular question about, and I think others had a question about, Scott, is, these two in particular, what, maybe I'm not using the right vernacular, but what's the inspiration for these roof lines?
I'm muted. So what we're looking at is the fact that we don't want to just replicate what was built over 100 years ago, because we're basically not building a mill building. We're building a complex for today's commercial and residential use. In your form-based bylaws, you basically show gable dormers, mansard dormers, shed dormers. And so we basically are utilizing the concepts that you've presented and trying to develop a building that is representative being built today, but also trying to have it be somewhat timeless as well, and have separate identities for these buildings. So that's basically where we are and what the thinking is. Now, we are incorporating some mansard dormers on the sides of the buildings, which I think we still have not finally show. I think we're still in the process of cooking those elevations. So actually, if you're in between building 40 and 50, in that kind of courtyard parking area, we were looking at replicating kind of the dormers that are on 21 Main Street, or I shouldn't say replicating, but again, doing something like what was there. So that's the reason that we are where we are on this concept.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott. I would concur that while I think it's important to be contextual or to understand the context, I think it's unreasonable and unrealistic to expect architecture that's built in 2022 to look like something that was built 100 years ago. We're
not asking that.
Yeah, I wasn't implying that you were, Lawrence.
Oh, sorry.
I'm seeing an H. Nicole with a hand raised.
Hi. Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone too for the meeting tonight. But I did want to just add that, and it's my personal opinion, but it might be difficult to replicate buildings that are 160, actually more than 100 years old, to make them exactly the same. But I would like to see more elements incorporated as well. I thought the roof idea that Joan made was excellent. I also am noticing some sort of concrete barriers along, it looks like Myrtle Street going over to Main Street. And to me, those look very, like they don't have a lot of character. I'd like to see a lot of the character of the original buildings sort of brought forth into areas like that, so that maybe there were some more elements of the stone or something like that in that area. That's really all I had to say, but thank you.
Oh, what you're saying is sort of interesting. I mean, you're what I hear there is it's not just the form, but also materials, right? So
materials, absolutely, and especially granite, because it is so integral to those original buildings, and it was Ashland milled granite, so it's very unique to the area and to Ashland. So it would be sort of it would be something that would bring forth more of Ashland's history and Ashland character to the new areas. I'd like to see more of that incorporated.
Yeah, and if I could just comment on that, again, we're somewhat limited in this presentation based on where we are in the renderings and the application of materials. So I concur with you that what we're showing in that particular rendering, as far as kind of the walls and so on, we definitely need to articulate what the materials are, and that, you know, that's something we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you.
You had your hand up at one point. Have your questions been answered?
Who are you talking about, Rami?
I thought you had your hand up.
I did. I was just going to comment on really just about the current zoning in the area. That a year ago, June, we did limit the height at 38 feet, and that was measured. That was going to be measured in the bylaw from Front Street, from the main street of whatever property it is. So in this case would be Main Street. And that 38 feet was based largely on other buildings around, particularly on the Bagel Table building, which seemed to be a good, seems to be a good scale for the street, that people seem to like it. So that we looked at that as an example. And also at that time, a year ago, June, we made some minimal setbacks that were related also to things we measured at the Bagel Table building, about things people seem to enjoy. So those all are in the bylaws, and they should and will be incorporated into this project if they aren't already. Thank you.
I just want to be aware of, so we do have a stop at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to try to get everybody's questions in. But Tamara, I believe you had your hand raised first.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. Based on the last town meeting we had and the presentation from the Sustainability Committee, are there any plans to use any sustainability related materials, formats, functions in this new construction? And that's it. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for that. Again, the State Energy Code is being upgraded as we speak, and we would be complying, if not exceeding, our values throughout the new construction, and trying to basically develop a very sustainable approach for the construction and for the mechanical and ventilation systems. As Rich mentioned, we're going to have solar on all of the roofs because he has them now and he'd be relocating them. But we'd also have additional roof area as well. Anything we can incorporate relative to HVAC systems, better insulation, better windows, again, sustainable approaches. We will be developing a checklist on all of those components and attempting to do as sustainable project within the budget as the budget allows.
All right, thank you. And then Joan, and then Lawrence. Sorry.
Thank you, Michael. Just quickly, just to clarify what you asked me about before, what Tricia was saying about the Bagel building versus what we see at the front of this building. I think the difference is when you look at the front of this building, you see the overhang. It might be the setback may be correct on the road level, but you see the overhang, which is imposing, and that's what makes it look so imposing to us, to me, I should say. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Lawrence?
I would agree with that previous comment. I notice on the building that's just down on the other side of the church, it does have that recess on the first floor, but also it has a little bit of mitigating upper story elements. The tree helps certainly, And there's a few other architectural elements that keep it from becoming just a flat wall. The architectural renderings proposed earlier, basically the upper stories are just flat. If there's some architectural elements that can break that facade, that flatness up, I think that would help. A very different question is about the fact that from street level, this is 3 stories. From ground level, it's 4 stories. Does this open up a can of worms for the planning board? Because how do you interpret it? And are there going to be other buildings that will come in and say, well, you did 4 stories from ground level, I want 4 stories from the street level. Is there, I'm not aware of anything in our rules and regs that addresses that issue. And if I'm wrong, correct me, please.
I believe the current bylaw does address that issue because we were specifically thinking about that kind of situation when we analyzed the downtown and analyzed the bagel table building. So the current bylaws were created after the 128 Main Street building, which is the one on the same side as the site. So we put those in place after that building was already created, but we looked at the bagel table building as perhaps a good example of something that works in the current downtown.
So how do you, so you're just saying the ground level doesn't apply?
I don't have it in front of me. I don't remember how it was written, but we did write it to be the main street. So I would have to go back and look. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head how we.
I can stop at town hall and pick that up.
Yeah, okay. It's online as well.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Larry. And then Marty, you just wrote it in a question. Is this going to be an all-electric building, or well, actually, or no new gas hookups, or are you still planning on using?
We would, again, we would evaluate that. We would hope that would be a potential to have it fully electric, but I think, again, we need to look at what the potential tenant mix is and how that will work ultimately. But we understand the advantage of that from a sustainable approach.
Okay. I think at this point now, I believe our next step is we're going to turn it over to Rami to summarize the conversation as he heard it, and then talk about next steps. And then Tricia, I believe you're going to close us out.
Okay. So in a way, I sort of jumped the gun earlier when you asked me to answer, Michael. But I think, again, there's sort of 2 parts, and some of these are very clear, and we've had answers to questions about the number of people who will be living there, the fiscal impact, the environmental impacts. I know the traffic study is something that folks want to hear more about, and and we'll expect to hear more about in our next session. And then I think the more sort of tricky bits are the idea of character and what constitute the appropriate design for Main Street in Ashland. I think there have been some interesting questions about form and the kind of inspirations that are being drawn from. I believe that some of what is being asked for exists in the as currently drawn, but perhaps could be articulate or pointed at more clearly, or made more sort of brought to the surface more clearly, and then perhaps there are other aspects that might require going back. And it sounds to me like the other piece of this is also not just form, but materials. And I think if I understand, Scott, you know, it's always a sort of musical chairs, and the music stops when the presentation happens and you have to present what you have. But as a designer, you've already in some ways moved past the designs you're presenting and are already kind of, you have further developments with respect to ideas about materials, for example, that you'll be able to show in the next iteration. Is that fair? I don't want to put you on the spot, but is that?
Oh yeah, yes, that's reasonable. And again, based on again some of the comments we heard tonight, we will be looking at a variety of aspects as well.
Yeah, and I would ask, you know, and I thank everyone who asked questions, whether it, or provided comments, whether it was in the chat or verbally. I think, you know, you all should be proud of yourselves. We're incredibly polite and kind to each other, and I really believe we need more of that in general these days. And I think we can have constructive discussions as a result. I think it's important for all of us to sort of express this in ways, you know, I like this, I am concerned about this, and I think there was a lot of that today. I would ask, particularly this issue of character, think about what it is about the character of your town that you do cherish so much, and bring that to the table the next time we meet, or share it, I suspect through Michael. Is that the right venue? If people have comments between now and the next time we meet?
Sure. So we've been able to record this. We've been able to capture everything in the chat. So yes, I'm happy to help continue the conversation. If people want to send questions to me, I can direct them to Rich, your team, and then we reconvene. I think it's on June 8th, correct?
Correct. But I would say, you know, that's sort of your everyone's homework to think about this sort of more squishy thing. What the character, the architectural character, what is it about it? And is it the way you approach a door, you know, an entrance to a building? Is it a way that you, before you get to that entrance, that there's a little bit of change between being outside and then being inside, right? Is there that sort of interstitial space that might allow you to sort of understand that you're sort of moving into a building? Or as you walk by a shop front, you're able to see into the shop front. What is it, you know, at what level, what size should that window be? What are the sort of pieces along Main Street that you care for and would like to see? I don't mean necessarily replicas, but you know, the kinds of things that you enjoy along your Main Street. And if possible, share those with Michael and the team before the next meeting, so they'll have a chance to respond.
Thanks, Rami.
So just to wrap up, I think we are right at that time. That I agree with Rami. If people could send as specific of comments as you can to Michael, then he can pass them on to the project team, because those are all valuable in this process. And I certainly hope everyone and more people will be able to join us on Wednesday, June 8th, where we will be having a second community meeting on this project. And I very much thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.